Nahum. In a world searching for meaning, few texts have shaped history, hearts, and human identity like the Bible. But beyond its verses lies a story, ancient, eternal, and alive. Welcome to Speed Reads, where we journey book by book through Scripture, not in fragments, but in sweeping narratives rich with depth, drama, and divine design. Today we explore the Book of Nahum, a powerful prophecy of judgment focusing on the fall of Nineveh, the capital of the Assyrian Empire, and the triumph of God's justice. Nahum's prophecy is short but striking, filled with vivid imagery, intense emotions, and profound theological insights. The book is essentially a divine declaration of vengeance against the city of Nineveh, a powerful, brutal city that had once repented under the preaching of Jonah, but had since returned to its violent and oppressive ways. Nahum's message centers on the certainty and totality of God's judgment upon the Assyrians, highlighting that no empire, however mighty, can escape the justice of God. The Assyrians had committed atrocities, enslaving, pillaging, and torturing the nations they conquered. Nahum prophesied the city's inevitable destruction, affirming that God is not only a God of mercy, but also one of justice, who will right the wrongs of the world and bring about the downfall of those who oppress the innocent. The opening chapter of Nahum reveals a God who is both a righteous judge and a mighty warrior. Nahum begins by describing the attributes of God, slow to anger, but powerful and vengeful when it comes to those who oppress and commit evil. He sets the tone by emphasizing God's ability to bring storms, earthquakes, and floods, showing that he controls all of creation and can use it to bring judgment upon the wicked. Nahum uses vivid imagery to portray God's power, likening him to a storm, a consuming fire, and a roaring flood. He emphasizes that while God is patient, he will not leave the guilty unpunished, and he will eventually avenge the oppressed. God's judgment on Nineveh is described with great detail in Nahum's prophecy. Nineveh, once the mighty capital of the Assyrian Empire, is depicted as a city that is both proud and arrogant, believing in its invincibility. The Assyrians had a history of cruelty toward their enemies, and their empire had grown through violence, fear, and oppression. Nahum compares the city to a lion that is eventually captured and slain, symbolizing the fall of the Assyrian Empire. The city is depicted as having piles of bloodshed and evil within its walls, and Nahum proclaims that its time has come. God has observed the wickedness and evil of Nineveh, and now the day of reckoning is near. The prophecy continues, with Nahum describing the military strategies that will lead to Nineveh's downfall. The city, which once boasted of its mighty defenses and military strength, is now portrayed as vulnerable. The gates of Nineveh will be opened to enemies, and the city's walls will be breached. The imagery in this chapter is stark. The city is like a prostitute, who will be stripped of all her wealth and beauty, and the once proud empire will be brought to ruin. Nahum highlights that Nineveh's sin of cruelty and idolatry has earned the wrath of God, and no amount of defense, no matter how formidable, will be able to protect it from the impending destruction. The prophet also speaks directly to Judah, offering a word of comfort in the midst of the Assyrians' dominance. Nahum reassures the people of Judah that God will deliver them from the oppression of the Assyrians. The oppression and destruction that Nineveh had brought upon Judah and other nations will come to an end. Nahum announces that the Assyrians' reign of terror will be cut short, and that God will restore peace and justice to his people. The end of Nineveh's reign is a promise of hope, not just for Judah, but for all the oppressed peoples who had suffered under Assyrian rule. In chapter 2, Nahum moves to the actual description of Nineveh's fall. He vividly portrays the siege of the city, where soldiers and warriors storm its walls, breaching the gates and overpowering its defenses. The detailed language evokes a sense of imminent doom for the city. Nineveh's wealth, its arrogance, and its history of power will no longer protect it. Nahum describes the plundering of the city, the destruction of its fortifications, and the fall of its leaders. The imagery of horses galloping, chariots racing through the streets, and soldiers clashing in battle creates a dramatic picture of chaos and violence. Nahum's words are a stark reminder that no matter how powerful a nation may seem, God's judgment is inevitable for those who commit wickedness. In chapter 3, Nahum elaborates on the reasons behind Nineveh's fall. He lists the various sins of the city: idolatry, cruelty, and the shedding of innocent blood. Nineveh's own arrogance and self-sufficiency are pointed out as reasons for its downfall. The city had become a center of oppression and violence, and now its destruction is assured. Nahum calls the leaders and inhabitants of Nineveh to recognize their sin and the inevitable consequences of their actions. The people of Nineveh are described as being oblivious to their fate, and Nahum declares that their time has come. The imagery of Nineveh's destruction is brutal and unrelenting. The city is compared to a prostitute, a city of bloodshed, filled with violence and corruption. The language is harsh, but it emphasizes that God will punish the wicked, and he will not be lenient toward those who have exploited and harmed others. The final verses of Nahum speak of the certainty of Nineveh's fall. The city's defenses, its walls and its armies will not be able to stop the judgment that is coming. Nahum declares that the leaders of Nineveh will be destroyed, and the city will be left in ruin. The once powerful empire will be no more. Nahum's prophecy is a reminder that God's justice will prevail, and those who oppress others will not escape his judgment. It is also a message of hope for the oppressed, as it affirms that God sees their suffering and will ultimately deliver them from their tormentors. Thank you for joining us on this powerful journey through the Book of Nahum. If you found this exploration insightful, be sure to subscribe to Speed Reads for more in-depth breakdowns of the Bible's timeless stories and prophecies. Up next, we will delve into the Book of Habakkuk, where we'll explore a prophet's honest wrestling with God's justice and the question of why evil seems to prevail in the world.